Hi, Steve.
Hi, Jim.
I've been looking at our episodes of late, and I think we could use some culturing up around here. What do you think?
Well, gosh darn, Jim. You think?
And hello and welcome everyone to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast where each week we two guys get together and we talk about records. It's really as simple as that. But Steve, who would not benefit from a little bit of culture now and then, right?
It doesn't hurt anybody. And folks, don't get nervous about it because we said the word culture. It's okay. You will be all right.
My name's Jim and I own a record store.
And I'm Steve, a record collector.
I think we're running a little bit of a risk today, putting classical music at the forefront, but this is the time of year, we're smack dab with Easter as of the recording of this, and this just gets you in the mood for listening to some good old classical music from time to time, right?
It does. And if anybody studies it and studies the composers, or we should call them artists, they will find out that it was pure rock and roll going on there. In fact, a lot of the rock and roll guys right now that we think were, oh my God, what did they do? They got nothing to some of these classical guys.
No, they were
are.
definitely we'll say classical rock stars of their time.
They were. They very much were, Jim. Yes.
Except they didn't call it classical music. Yeah, they didn't call it classical music, but it was just music.
Yes. Yes. True.
And even now, the classical overall genre is split into so many subgenres, especially when you look at Discogs. It gets a little wild, the amount of splintering that it's taken, over the centuries as far as the type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there is a lot of phenomenal classical coming out, what I call neoclassical, that I really enjoy. And I have some favorite artists that I pretty much buy whatever comes out. So the genre is alive and well. And everything that you hear now, guess where it developed from?
Oh, yeah. So we will dive into some of our favorites from the classical genre coming up in a little bit here. We'll also cover our pickups. But Steve, guess what? Our Final Four, the March Vinyl Madness. You know what? You talked about Michigan and the other Final Four thingy that's going on, the basketball tournament being an upset. We got our own upset of the century here, don't we?
Well, Vegas is in an uproar. I mean, so many people's bracket just got broken. The betting's gone wild, and yeah, it is a surprise.
For those of you who've been following over the past few weeks, our March Vinyl Madness tournament started with 16 albums representing 8 decades. We narrowed that down to the 8 albums representing each of the 8 decades from the 50s through the 2020s, and then put them at each other over the past few weeks. And this last week was the Final Four, where we had the 60s going up against the 50s going up against the 70s, and the 60s going up against the 80s for the best decade of music. And guess what, Steve? Let me call our bracket up. Here is the upset that we have been talking about. Holy smokes, Led Zeppelin has been dethroned and will not move the 60s forward to the finals. This is amazing to me.
It is. But it's Prince. And I would just like to point out that was, the album from the decade that I picked. I just want to point
that out. Yes, you did.
Sure.
So in the 60s versus the 80s, and we're talking the slimmest of margins, Prince and the Revolution and Purple Rain representing the 80s edged out Led Zeppelin 2 from the late 60s, mind you. Maybe if we'd put Zeppelin in the 70s, it might have been a bit different thing, but who knows? We can't go back on this. 51.2% to 48.8%. You cannot get closer than that. Yeah. But the 80s have edged it out, showing that maybe our audience at least skews into the higher end Gen X like me.
Yes. Who knew we had such a young audience, Jim? Wow.
Oh, 60-year-olds. Wow, you guys are young. On the other side of this, though, this one not as surprising, but still it was kind of close, Steve. The 1970s, represented by Television and Marquee Moon from 1977. Very close, but not as close as the other one. But they beat out the 1950s with John Coltrane and Blue Train. Let's see, that was 53% something to 46% something. So not as close as the other one, but still close enough for government work on this case. So that means, Steve, that going into the finals for next week, it's Michigan. No, wait a minute. Hold on. That's the wrong one. We are going to put the 1970s up against the 1980s for the best decade of music.
Which is basically my decade of music versus your decade of music.
That is right. We're coming up on it, even though they're both your picks, but we're all right with that. Because, I'm going to stick by the 80s on this one, Steve. I think we're going to do good. So, folks, let's get to that bracket and show you what that looks like here. All of these albums were great heading into it, Steve. We started off with some really cool stuff representing the decades. Folks chose the 8th that moved forward. And, Zeppelin, we thought early on was going to run roughshod over all of this with the 1960s, but that is not the case. Yeah. So that means that heading into this final voting week, as you folks know, we'll put the link for that vote down in the description of both the BLEAVE episode, the YouTube episode, and because it's on BLEAVE Network, all of the subsequent Spotify and everything else, that will be in the description. You just simply click on that link and toss your vote in. Who has the best decade of music, or which is the best decade for music, rather, the 1980s versus the 1970s? Notice I put the 80s first, huh?
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to point out in the 70s, Rush had a lot of their very best albums in the 70s. No. And I just wanted to bring that up.
Well, Steve, I'd like to counter that point with the fact that some of my favorite Rush albums are from the 80s.
Okay.
So you folks can take all that into mind. It's not necessarily Prince versus Television. It is the 80s versus the 70s. So we'll see where things go, and we'll wrap this big tournament up next week. And then I guess you guys can go watch. Is the other tournament going to be over by then too?
By Monday.
Okay. All right.
Ours goes on longer. We like to spread it out.
Gotcha. Well, we're also going once a week instead of every other night.
Yeah.
So, all right, folks, let your votes be heard in March Vinyl Madness. Who is it going to be, the 1970s or the 1980s? We'll take her from there. So let's move on to this week's pickups, shall we? I've got an interesting one, and one that's going to lead us to a further discussion a couple of weeks down the line, Steve. I found something very interesting in an upgrade this week. So we'll talk about that when I get to mine in a moment or two. How'd you do this week?
Yeah, I have some interesting stuff. I had some VCLT come in. This is from Chris the Vinyl Piper, who is a big collector of psych. I mean, if we ever do a psych one, he'd be a great guy to bring on because he finds originals and he picks them up. Obscure psych. But he sent me this because this is The Zoo, and it is called Chocolate Mousse. And this came out. They're an LA psych band. They formed in '66, and they only put out one album, and this is it. And Chris just got an original. Now, this has been on my want list for quite some time. Haven't pulled the trigger on it to get it. It's a nice repress there. I don't know what color, turquoise maybe?
Sure.
Possible?
Sure.
All right, we'll go with it. And it's really solid psych album. I liked it, from side 1 to side 2. They didn't get into any of the hippy dippy trippy stuff. They kept it more psych. Also, we don't got any flower power crap or stuff.
Cool.
So that was nice. Then I had picked this one up. I got this from Noble Records, I saw, and the group is called Cavus Jute. They are from Australia, and its name of the album is Wide Open. And there we go with a hype sticker in the way. Now look at this vinyl, Jim. This is pretty snazzy.
Oh,
Wow.
cool. A
Isn't that
blue
nice?
splatter, blue and black splatter.
Yeah. This band was active from 70 to 71. A lot of psych bands just don't seem to last very long.
No.
You know, it's like, we do one album. Okay, we're done. You know, no one cared. But then their albums, decades later, become worth hundreds, or even thousands of dollars. So yeah, this was a neat pickup of now. Noble Records has been pressing a lot of psych albums. What I've found is, a major plant is pressing these and get hold of these record stores. Would you like a limited run of this pressing? So you can get, when you look, you'll see all this variety of these being run. So
How do we get in
but
on that action?
yeah, well, you need to go in and say, I'll take 500. But
Okay.
yeah, since I know Dylan, I thought, hey, okay, we'll do that. Nice guy. And then I got this psych album. So,
Psych Week.
okay. Yeah, Psych Week. It's Psych Week. Hey, kids, there's Shark Week on TV. This is Psych Week on the podcast. And this group is High Tide, and they're from England because I wanted to make sure I spread my psych around. This is a psych prog. And yeah, look at that. There definitely is some prog in it, which, yeah. Yeah, okay. Uh, I can't say it's my favorite part. Black vinyl. They formed in 69, broke up in 70, put out one album. But they did reform in 89 and broke up in 90. And they put out in that time period 6 albums.
Oh my goodness. They were making up for lost time.
I guess they just must have found a bunch of tapes of crap. Throw it out, quick. It is, yeah. The album cover, for those of you that are just listening on Spotify, there's this big old ship, a warship, coming through, and there is like all these creatures in the water. I mean, it's like, wow. I don't know what's happening, but it's kind of cool picture. And some people are falling into it, and I think they're all getting eaten up and gobbled up. So, High Tide, and the name of the album is Sea Shanties.
Okay.
That's why the ship. So Sea Shanties.
Is it prog/psych sea shanties then? Is that the new genre you're
Yeah.
creating?
Yes, exactly. So that was, and the final one I bought. Someone had shown an album from her, Lorraine McKennitt out of Ireland. Remember the Mummers Dance?
Yep.
From the 90s? So she did the Mummers Dance, and I love the Mummers Dance. So I bought a kind of a greatest hits type thing when there's only one hit I want. So it's the Mummers Dance. It's a lot of, I like Irish music, but I don't like when it gets really slow, which is more what you get here. Give me a jig, give me a reel. That's what I like, Mr. Gleason.
Okay.
Jigs and reels. I like to jump
O Gleason
around.
to you.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Oh, Gleason. Oh, Gleason. So I bought that. It was inexpensive. I see super value at Barnes and Noble, which means I got it on clearance. So that's
all right.
Grabbed it.
Well,
there
very
we go,
cool.
Jim. That's it. Yep.
All right. So my pickups this week, Steve, are just a couple actual recent pickups. So actually, let me clarify that. One upgrade, one pickup, and one I've had this in my collection, but I'm counting it as a new pickup. Let me start off with, I know it's one of your favorites. You're trying hard. Radiohead and OK Computer. Now, I've had a copy of this in the collection for several years. I never had anything older. Mine was a 2020s reissue. I had a smaller clutch. I don't want to call it a collection, but it was a collection of records. 150 some odd come in this past week. and there were all these newer reissue types things. But, and this is where I want to get with this, my copy of OK Computer was a 2020-ish reissue. Standard stuff, the kind I get here from our distributors at the store. This is the double album version, not that triple LP. I think you got the triple LP version on the reissue expanded.
Yeah, if you're going to go big with an album you don't much care for, you might as well get 3 instead
might
of
as
2.
well. So nothing huge on this, except for the fact that when I got into this, this is a 2008 pressing of this.
Wow.
And so I thought, you know what, it's cool. I'll take the upgrade and push mine out. But, and this is where I want to go in a couple of weeks, because there's a lot of other stuff in this smaller collection I brought in of that era. What I found, Steve, is that, and I'm going to have to do more exploring on this and do some more research, but it seems as if the pressings that are coming from the early part of the resurgence of vinyl, and we talked about the RIAA numbers last week, that increasing for the past 19 years, but I'm finding that stuff that was pressed in the mid to late 2010s and into the mid 2010s, the value of these are jumping up crazy on Discogs for some reason. So these early resurgence repressings are now much more valuable than the current 2020 repressings of things, which makes sense. I mean, it's nowhere near originals that you would get from things from the 90s, for example. But for this one, coming in, the top end on this is around $110 on Discogs. Median is right around $60. And this is an album that lists new vinyl, the new repressings, it lists for about $42, $43 now with the price increases. So I want to come back in a couple of weeks after we do Record Store Day stuff, maybe a week or so after Record Store Day. I'll have some more time to research this and see where these late 10s and early teens pressings are, because there was a couple of other ones that absolutely surprised me in that batch.
Yeah.
And OK Computer to me is a decent one. I like that album.
Yeah. I've wound up, after I bought that again, triple album, I liked it.
Good.
It just took like 30 years.
There you go. All right. My next one pickup, actually, oddly enough, from that same collection, a group that I'd only heard of because of the Kids in the Hall film, Brain Candy. And this is a group called Cibo Matto, and one song from there called Birthday Cake, which was just an absolute post-punk nutso song in the movie. I saw Birthday Cake on this Cibo Matto album, Viva La Woman, and originally this was released in 1996. I have got an orange vinyl pressing. It's a nice little orange vinyl from 2016. So again, kind of that sweet spot that I've talked about with the Resurgence reissues. But once I got into this, I went into it, Steve, with thinking that, oh man, at Cibo Matto, I'm going to hear the rest of that just absolute punk knockout stuff like Birthday Cake from the Kids in the Hall.
Yeah.
Not the case. This is pretty much, I want to call it, well, Discogs calls it abstract trip hop. I'm going to call it almost ambient in cases. It's very ethereal, but it's got an electronic feel to it. Okay, maybe some trip hop in there, and I liked it. I enjoyed it, but I was expecting that punk version of Birthday Cake that I did not get.
When I bought the CD back when that came out, I like, okay, well, that's a little different.
It is. So I'm gonna digest it a little bit further and see if I can figure out why the version that I was familiar with and that sits on my iPhone is so much different than what is arguably the original version. They must have souped it up for the movie, I guess. Okay, and finally, a box set, and this leads directly into our subject matter today. I've had this in my collection for a couple of years, but not officially because it did not exist in Discogs. So I took the time the other day to put a 3 LP box set of Handel's Messiah into Discogs that didn't exist. I even uploaded the audio to this to our YouTube channel. So for those of you that want to go and culture yourselves a little bit further, you can listen to this. But this is a performance by the University of Michigan's Choral Union and the University of Michigan Symphonic Orchestra, recorded in December of 1978, the full performance of Handel's Messiah. And it came also with this cool little insert 3 LPs inside the box. Nifty little insert, and it's got all it lists pretty much everybody that was involved on this and some description. So it's a lot of heavy reading to go with your heavy listening of Handel's Messiah. And it, like I said, technically just added to my collection because I put it in Discogs just so I could add it to my collection. So
That is, every Christmas for decades, I play it. I like it. But fun fact, it's actually a more Easter.
yeah,
Yes, it's the birth of Christ, and they go into a lot of that. But the Hallelujah, of course, all this is about the resurrection
yep.
at Easter. And so that's kind of, it should be played at Easter, but dang, it sounds so good at Christmas time.
It does. And you know what? This particular version, it sounds really nice. They did a good job. It's actually from, and I had to double check on this. It's the University of Michigan Records. That's the label. And there's several releases if you go into Discogs from the University of Michigan record label, obviously because they had a very active music department in the 70s and 80s, 60s probably as well. And they pressed a lot of cool stuff from their different from the musical society. So whether it be marching bands or symphonic or choral societies, that all fits into this. So happy to give this a spin. And like I said, I did capture it. The full audio of this University of Michigan performance, this is a little plug, Steve, is up on the Radio Wasteland Records YouTube channel.
There we go.
Please check it out if you guys get a chance, because you might want to just give yourself some culture today, as we talked about.
You know, Jim, I just want to say my very first concert experience as a youngster in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, was Handel's Messiah. My
Really?
dad forced us to go there. He actually was singing. There was a college group putting it on, and no, everyone has to come. I thought I was going to die. It's like, it's not done. It's still going. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh, just make it stop. For
Yeah.
God's sakes, you know,
Almost.
it was not a good experience. I was not excited about it, but now I absolutely adore that album.
You've got a lot more appreciation to it. Yeah, almost 2.5 hours on vinyl for this U of M version of that. So that was not an easy task getting her up to YouTube either, by the way, when I'm trying to do so much other stuff, but we did. Folks, as we do in each and every week after our pickups and some of the things that we talk about, we will put up a Spotify playlist so you can listen in on some of these. I think Cibo Matto's up there. I don't believe I'm going to get the U of M version of Handel's Messiah. I'll find another one. We'll put that in there. But again, you can head over to our YouTube channel to check that particular version out if you like. And Steve, I hope I can find your other ones too. That should be fun. But the link to that Spotify playlist is in the description. However you watch and or listen to our podcast, scroll down a little bit once you're done listening to us ramble, and you can listen in on that as well. So shall we move into the cultured segment of this week's episode, Steve?
That's right. We did put on clean T-shirts today. We thought
I'm wearing a
that's
Dead
we're
Milkman
doing that.
t-shirt.
Yes. So
Oops.
I shaved. I took a good shower. I mean, I'm ready to go. I really probably should have dressed up more, but we'll get
Clean up
by.
nice. So classical music is really the root of, I mean, everything as you come into this, Steve. It predates, obviously, anything that we've talked about. You want to talk about the best decade of music? Maybe next time we should do a best century for music. We'll put the 1700s up against the 1800s, Steve, and see how that works. I am by no means an expert in this. And I think a lot of people who collect vinyl, they gravitate toward obviously the stuff they like. We've talked about this so many times before, the things that you listen to on the radio, the things you're exposed to in your youth. And classical music, you just gave a prime example, something that a lot of people may be forced into at a young age and end up creating some sort of a disdain. They don't really like it because it's not something that's immediately in their wheelhouse in their developmental years. But like you and like me, I think later on, as you explore and you open your mind up to different kinds of music and you work yourself backwards, you do gain that further appreciation for some of this.
Now, I grew up on classical. My dad had about 20 albums. That's probably about it. He wasn't going to spend more. All classical. And every Sunday, he would play classical. After church, after he was done preaching, he would come home, and his way to unwind, from fire and brimstone or whatever it was, we play some classical music. And he liked to have us come in and explain what this song was about, the storyline behind it. Oh, we were just thrilled as hell for that. But I have found that the music that he would play is now favorites of mine.
Wow.
So it just, yeah, and I love classical music. I used to
Oh
go
yeah.
in, I'd be buying, snagging it up because it's so inexpensive.
Yep.
But there are very expensive um classical music albums out there. You
Yeah. Oh
just
yeah.
got to know what
Yes.
you're doing, and there's just so much out, and you could probably find it. But the hard part is, then if you ever want to resell it, you got to find the right person. Not
You
easy.
you do. And from the record store side of things, I'll absolutely agree with that. We have got I would say a fairly decent priced classical collection here, maybe a couple of hundred records. Most of it is in that $3 to $5 range. It's very cheap. The backside of that, and I know you used to dig back there as well as our dollar room. There's several thousand classical albums back there, and that's
Yeah.
what makes this a little daunting for someone to dive into. Is like, well, if I want to start getting some classical music, where do I start? My recommendation is, you know what? Go with the big composers. Go with the names
Yeah.
that you hear, the ones that you hear popping into soundtracks for television and movies whenever there's a need for
Yes.
classical music. That's the great place to start. Then you can explore down the line. But you're right. So much of this, thousands of them in our dollar room, and they're clean, and most of them are unused. However, a lot of them are Reader's Digest compilations as well. Longin Symphonette. Yep, that is a good box
Yep, the
set there.
story of great music. After the flood, a record store owner, contacted me. Goes, I have some classical box sets that I really can't sell. Would you be interested? And I said, all right, send them my way. He sent me three big boxes full of them. And so, have I listened to them all? No, but I like them. I mean, in this one here is a prelude to modern music. These are so inexpensive, but it is great sampler stuff, great to listen to. So yeah, super duper cheap to get. But Jim, you brought up a good point. Like movies, everybody's been exposed to classical music,
Yep.
and there is so many movies that classical song is makes that movie.
2001 Space Odyssey, Strauss. You cannot
Yeah.
think of that without, and I don't know if I've got my Strauss album in here that's not the sound. I do have the soundtrack. Um, Ride of the Valkyries. You've got that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
Yep.
much,
Wagner.
yeah, anything from Beethoven as well. Now, this is where, let me start off with my Beethoven. I think we showed that maybe a little bit earlier. This is the box set. And again, the other thing with classical, Steve, and maybe you'll agree on this too, is you got to decide how and where you're going to go. Do you want full orchestral symphonies? Do you want operas or orettos? Do you want chorales? Do you want strings? There's so many different subgenres that are identified now.
Yeah.
Even Beethoven, this is a box set of Beethoven's 9 symphonies. Very cool. Leibowitz and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. So it comes in much like the box sets with the booklet and separations. But this is just Beethoven's symphonies. This does not include his piano stuff, the solos, or the sonatas that would go into that. That's whole other things too. So you have to kind of decide where your interests are going to lie. I tend to think the symphonies are cool because you've got that full orchestration
Yeah.
going on behind, and you can really listen to what, in this case, the composer's vision was in a much larger scope because of that larger orchestra.
Yeah. I with Beethoven, though he did have some incredible piano um,
Yep.
sonatas and that he did, but his 9 symphonies are well known. The sixth, we talked about that before, and some other broadcasts is a personal favorite. And, and the thing is with classical, it really changes a lot. I mean, it started with just in the church,
Yep.
and the church with Gregorian chant is really the first, in the 800s. And Gregorian chant became popular in the 90s again. There was,
Yes, I
stuff
remember
on there.
that.
And so it came about, but then it went into, then the French began to change. Okay, so much. All right, we got enough Gregorian chant. They began to do more to it. They began to change that music and became there was more substance. And then when the Renaissance hit, it really began to go. And Northern Italy just kind of took over, and they began making sophisticated choral music that became opera,
Yep.
which opera blew up in the Baroque period, which is a personal favorite of mine. I mean, when I think of Baroque, it's Bach, and I grew up on Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. I mean, he was such a big part because my father loved Bach, and this is the Brandenburg Concertos. A billion movies have the Brandenburg Concertos in there. It's recognizable. You hear it, you get excited, and it still comes out. I mean, Glenn Gould out of Canada, a huge pianist, does them. Switched on Bach.
Yep.
Gotta, there we go. Let's have some more Bach. We switch them on there. So
You begin to introduce
you know,
some Moog into that as well in the '60s with
hmm
the Bruno Walters, not the Bruno Walter, the switched on box stuff.
yeah, whatever that
Walter
dude's name
Carlos, Walter
was.
Carlos, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Bach is still a big part of it, and his, and of course he did. Oh man, what was that? Toccata and Fugue. Do do
Hmm.
do 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 do. Yeah, the big horror movie thing, especially in the 30s, of that organ. Oh my God, just great stuff. I'm a big fan of Bach, and that same time period in the Baroque we had Handel, which you
Hmm.
showed Handel's Messiah. One of my all-time favorite albums is Handel's Music for Water,
Hmm.
which during this time, I'm sorry, Jim, I'm just going off now
Oh
because
no.
I love classical, but during this time, all these composers, it was patronage. They had to work for a royal court. They had to work for a church. If they didn't have a record player, they just, hey, Bach, come in here. I'd like a song now. But these composers had to create stuff for them because they were getting paid for it. Well, Handel was having problems. He was from Germany. Things weren't going well in Germany. He thought, well, let me try over in England. So he's trying to get something going in England. Nothing's really happening. So he comes up with this music for water. And he heard that the king's going to be floating down the Thames River. So he brings his orchestra out by the Thames River. And as the king's coming down, we strike up music for water. And the king dug it, man. He goes, "Yeah, baby, this thing's got a beat. It's easy to dance to. I think." And he gave the devil horns to Handel. Rock on, maybe. This is great. And so away it went, and Handel became very popular. Over in England, obviously he wasn't making it in Europe, and then he began to travel all over. And the other thing I want to bring up, just with Bach. Bach had 16 kids. Can you imagine that? 16 kids. But this was at the time where, if you the Monty Python film Meaning of Life, every sperm is sacred. That was Johann Bach. I
Okay.
think you're saying that.
And we talked about the personalities earlier of some of these composers. And although I realize fictionalized, I think a great representation of that would be the movie Amadeus, and
Mhm.
showing the life of Mozart and what he kind of represented and what he went to as far as him being the court composer, working with court to compose some of his best work. And yeah, I haven't seen the movie in a long time. I'm probably going to have to go back and rewatch that now after today's episode. But it was always kind of a neat one to see that type of personality, i.e., that rock star temperament tossed
Mhm.
into contemporary classical.
Yeah. So many of these composers, they'd get in court, they'd be eyeing someone else. Well, okay, we're skipping the wife here. There affairs, more pregnancies, all kinds of stuff going on. Let's marry a cousin. I mean, Jerry Lee Lewis had nothing. These guys were marrying their cousin way before that, and it wasn't no third cousin either. So it's just, hey, it's the way, it's the rock star life, man. And you mentioned, Mozart, which again, part of that Baroque period with no, actually Mozart. I'm sorry, classical, 1750 to about 1820 was the classical period. Mozart came in and putting out that Vivaldi.
Yep.
Nope, Vivaldi was before Schubert. But here, this is his piano concertos. He had some great ones. But oh man, I didn't pull it. It's, Ein Klein, Ein Klein, EIN Klein. Bum 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 bum
Yep.
bum bum. It's it all over in movies. I mean, that is such a popular one. You'll hear it in movies, you'll hear it on programs, and it's just incredible what music Mozart. But he did Marriage of Figaro and stuff. I mean, he did opera. I love opera. I think I've mentioned before I used to be a part of the Detroit Opera Company. Not a singer. I mean, I just paid to go
A
listen.
patron.
Yeah, a patron. They tried. Oh, hey, that's just like those classical guys. But was the at the classical period, these guys were still kind of patronage, but it was beginning to change because they were becoming stars, and other people wanted to hear this stuff. So suddenly, concerts were being set up, and they're being paid, so they don't need the patronage
Hmm.
anymore, and they could start traveling. Trains came about, it made it easier to get around. You didn't have to go by donkey from place to place. Hey, the orchestra, let's go, and everyone jumps on a horse or whatever. Now we could take a train. So the world began to change, and yes, so now they were playing for the world and
Hmm.
not just a royal court or some rich dude, which I think we're still doing. I mean, people, rock stars are still going to Dubai just to play a concert for some rich dude. You know,
Yeah, oh
give you
yeah,
$1 million. Got it.
setting up a residency in Vegas at the
Yes.
at the Sphere.
Yes. See, classical music is it's still happening.
Yeah.
We're still doing it.
Now, we talked about collecting earlier, and if you collect, and I'm not a huge classical music fan or collector, but I do have some cool ones. I've got some of the biggies, so I guess that makes me fairly typical. But I have found a niche in some of my collectible for classical, and that is Michigan, or more
Mhm.
succinctly, the Detroit Symphony Orchestra for the years. So here is Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture as performed by the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. This, I believe, is late 70s. I'd have to look up the pressing on that. But, being here at the store, I get to see a lot of these things come through, and I'll give them a listen and decide if I want to keep them. I think I showed one off the other day. I didn't end up keeping that one, but a Rachmaninoff, a Symphony Number Two, done by the Detroit Symphony Orchestra as well. Not familiar with this piece, but I've listened to it, and it's actually pretty darn cool. And this one, Steve, you may remember this, and I've had this. This is the store copy. I actually have two of these. I've got a store copy and one in the personal from the 1960s. This is the Dow Chemical Company's Symphony Orchestra, the
Yeah.
girls' chorus, and the Dow male chorus, singing different and performing different classical pieces. This one actually is even on red vinyl. It's an unknown year, but I think I've tagged this to being into the 60s, generic cover and all. Uh, but just that's a very cool, in this case, local collectible to have. How many people
Yeah.
remember seeing the Dow Symphony Orchestra play in the 60s here in town versus have that pressing of it?
Nice. You showed the Tchaikovsky's 1812. That was another one we grew up with. That one we liked because there's cannons firing
Yes.
in there, and as my dad would explain that whole thing, and that came in during the Romantic period that replaced the Classical period. That was 1800 to 1910. So you had Beethoven was part of that period also. but the music now had changed where it was about telling more of a story. And again, 1812 was the war, and that's what Tchaikovsky was portraying. Beethoven, he did, the Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral. It's a story. It's about nature, and that's what their new Romantic period was doing. But it was also about nationalization, about how great our country is. And so classical pieces began to change kind of like that. But this is two versions. This is a stereo fidelity from Columbia. This is an original. I bought this at Radio Wasteland. It goes for a decent amount of money. Here's the repress of it that was done. That is sounds just incredible. From Bruno Walter. He's the one that conducts it, and this is from Analog Productions. They
Oh,
did
yep.
it. It's kind of it's this they can do some really nice high end records on classical if they get someone to buy it. There's that Mozart one. That Ein Klein. This is that.
Okay, yep.
That's the famous one. Okay. Uh, here was another analog production they did, the Royal Ballet. And this is beautiful. This Tchaikovsky, for the most part, Tchaikovsky was big into the whole ballet thing with Sleeping Beauty, Swan Lake,
Yep.
all that.
Nutcracker.
Yep, Nutcracker. So yes, Russia was dancing all over the place. Of course, the peasants were about ready to revolt and then kill everybody. Uh, you know, they weren't the peasants were not dancing at the time, but it's a beautiful album. They have a book inside of here, and just gorgeous, just
Sorry, I can't
gorgeous
let that
sounding.
go. The peasants are revolting. Yep, they stink on ice. One quick one, Steve. The pressing, you mentioned this, the pressing matters, especially for
Yeah.
represses of classical. Deutsche Grammophon into the 70s as well did in 60s and 70s did fantastic pressings. And if you ever really want to press the limits of your stereo system, a Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture will do that. You can tell how well your stuff is balanced and whether or not you're going to need any rumbles, but if you get a good pressing of that, your system will let you know that you've got it set up right.
And I don't have it. I never brought that back after the flip or whatever. I'm looking and go, I don't got 1812 overture. Oh my God. So I got to go out and get a good pressing of that. Uh, Grieg was another for nationalism. He talked about Norway and Norway folk tales and things like that. But then the 20th century, it became with modernism, and things really changed. They kind of abandoned tonality, shall we say, and they found
Mm-hmm.
new inspiration in impressionism. And so these the music really went bonkers. Okay, it was like free jazz of the classical world happening with Bartok. I mean, there's so many of these composers that I can't say their names, I can't pronounce them. But in the U.S., we did have Aaron Copland come in
Yep.
with Appalachian Spring. And this is a beautiful from Speaker's Corner. This is a beautiful pressing of Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring and Billy the Kid from the London Symphony Orchestra. You would hear, if you hear Appalachian Spring, you're going to go, I know that. I know that
Yep.
song. It's so famous.
On that note, you get Gershwin coming in as well, and
Yes.
this is one of my favorite go tos. This is a Bernstein doing Rhapsody in Blue of Gershwin and America in Paris, also from Gershwin. It's a nice pairing to have. If I were to recommend to folks that if you're looking for a more modern, and modern being obviously the 1900s in this case, piece of classical, this would be a go to on that. Is Bernstein's renditions of the two big Gershwins.
Yeah. Absolutely gorgeous stuff. Yeah, we mentioned I mentioned that there's so much modern classical, and a really good spot to start is Kronos Quartet.
Yes, they
Kronos
get a little
Quartet.
weird.
Yeah, it can, but it's in a lot of movies. This is with Philip Glass, which talk about get a little weird. It definitely can happen, but they have so many albums. Try
Yep.
to be a completist on Kronos Quartet. You got to work at it. Steve Reich, that guy can really get weird and out there, but it's interesting music that, again, I find some cool stuff in it, but yeah, I'm kind of pick and choose on him.
My modern stuff tends to go backwards, and this touches into the psych rock era a little bit too. I think I've shown this before. Um, this is Jack Nietzsche's Saint Giles Cripplegate or Cripplegate. Nietzsche was a producer, and he actually worked with Phil Spector on a lot of rock albums, but he was also a composer in his own right. And this is a 1972 pressing of his classical stuff, and it looks like a darn
Yeah.
psychedelic record. Other ones of that era in the 70s, early 70s, Paul Winter Consort. I've got a copy of Icarus, which is good modern, classical. And these guys, I think you've seen them before too. They're typically known. Chip Davis is known for the Christmas stuff, but there's a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
series of Mannheim Steamroller, the Fresh Air series. I just have the first one here, but I do have all of these. This is that good, more modern classical sounds, but that gets very keyboard and electronic centric in there, as do a few of those other ones.
Mm-hmm.
One final one of mine. I've got both of these. I just brought out the Frank Zappa, the London Symphony Orchestra plays
Yeah.
Zappa from 1974, I believe. No, 83. This is into the 80s. I'm sorry. So you get this classical renditions of Zappa coming through, which is interesting to listen to from time to time, regardless.
I guess I haven't had that interest yet, but you never
Yes.
know, Jim. My personal favorite new composer is Max Richter out
Yep.
of Germany, and this is the Blue Notebook. And on here, he has "The Nature of Daylight" is an incredible, beautiful, beautiful song. I've sent that to a number of different people, and they fall in love with it. This is probably Max Richter. The Blue Notebooks is one of his most famous albums. That is just solid, but great classical. But he here was one of my this is my favorite. He took Vivaldi, so we have here's a Vivaldi Four Seasons. Richter took it, deconstructed it, made it different. It's very electronic, but you got violins, you got everything going on, but he just took it apart and made it something totally new and different. Gorgeous. It's exciting music that I love what he did with this thing. And Richter still he puts out a lot of stuff. He's done so many movie soundtracks. You look at he's just done there's just he's all over the place when it comes to soundtracks. Very, very involved. So you hear this stuff. This was a neat one. Henrik Gorecki, and it's Symphony of Sorrowful Songs. Beth Gibbons sings on this. And so, oh God, what group was she in? Beth Gibbons. She's in a rock band, but she does the choral on here. Gorgeous.
Cool.
This is just a wonderful one and a newer one. And here's another interesting lady, Anna von Hauswolf. That's the nice thing of classical music. It's just crap I can't pronounce. So, but this is organ. This is all organ related. So you go back, you can think Baroque period where organ was really big. Thank you, Bach. And she just does some interesting. Well, you can just see by the artwork, it looks like she's inside this mouth of whatever this kind of demon thing is, and fascinating music. So there is so much interesting stuff still being made that I don't know nearly enough about it, but I enjoy it.
And you mentioned soundtracks too, and this is a whole nother avenue to take. You get John Williams, you get Hans Zimmer nowadays,
Mm,
and the Zimmer
yeah.
stuff you'd seen. Any number of that from Star Wars, from to Inception, and it's Williams has got his fingers in so much other stuff from the past 30 years, 40 years. It's incredible to think that he has composed that much, but that is you're talking 21st century classical in some cases now.
True, Jim. Fantastic point. And so people will say, I don't like classical music. Did you watch that movie? Did you like the music? That is all part of it. but classical music has been going on since the 800s.
Yep.
So that is many, many centuries. So you kind of pick and choose. But what you got to do is you just experiment,
Yep.
try something, and it only costs you generally $1. You can experiment, really inexpensive with classical.
You might be surprised. But now if there's anyone out there that is really going to be resistant to that, I guess I'd recommend something like this album here. This is the London Symphony Orchestra doing classic rock or classical rock volume 1. So it's London Symphony doing the likes of Bohemian Rhapsody, Nights in White Satin. Both songs lend themselves nicely to that. But then we get Whole Lot of Love from Zeppelin on here and Paint It Black from the Stones. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and I'm Not in Love. So yeah, this is just, I don't want to call it parody, but it's just an interesting take on 60s rock, 70s rock.
I was when you say, I was expecting you to pull out a Looney Tunes album. Looney.
That'll work as well.
I mean, you talk about pure classical. Looney Tunes was just, they just took that classical music.
I didn't get it. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to show this. The Walt Disney's Fantasia soundtrack with the Philadelphia Orchestra with Leopold Stokowski directing on that. This is such a cool album when you get into, if you're familiar with that animated film, but the booklet that comes with it is just, it's impressive like the film is. I don't want to say cartoon, the animated. So.
Yes.
All right, folks. So where do you stand on classical music? Again, I'll say that I believe that it is the foundation of everything. It can be found in so many other, elements, influencing elements which influence, if you want to think of it like that. Didn't get a chance to show my nice album, The Five Bridges. That's prog rock, but Emerson's got his classical leanings in that as well.
Yeah. Even Kiss, You Got Great Expectations. They used classical.
Yep.
They took from classical music for that song. Yeah.
So please feel free to chime in on the comments. Did we miss a favorite composer of yours, possibly, or a favorite era? Steve, you've covered the eras very nicely, a lot more knowledgeable than I could have ever hoped to be on that. You are steeped in it. Let's see, we can go to the classical Baroque period all the way to African rock garage music and all points in between and psychobilly thrown in just for the heck of it. But you're well-rounded, sir, and I commend you on that.
Passion.
There we go. All right, so that'll do it for this week's episode of Two Guys Talking About Records. Next week, Steve, I think maybe there's like some sort of big event coming up here in a couple of weeks. I'm trying to remember what that is. It's, Record Store Day. That's coming up.
Well, we should put together a survival guide, a survival video on how to survive Record Store Day and get exactly what you want.
That'll work. Maybe we should even lean on a special guest for that.
I think we should do that, Jim.
Okay. Also, I got to tease this. I've got a grail on the way of sorts for a pickup. So I'll tease that. All right. So until next time, you have been listening and or watching to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast. Please do not forget to vote in our finals. Who has the best decade of music? In the 1900s now. We're not talking 16s, 17s, or 18s, but 1970s versus the 1980s. Who will come out on top? Make your voice heard in that vote and let us know, and we'll give you the final winner next week on the podcast.
It sounds fantastic. And yes, just go ahead and check off those 70s as you're going. And just remember, 70s was great and 70s was fun.
All right. So until next time, my name is Jim and I own a record store.
And I'm Steve, a really classy kind of record collector.
I should put my tie on. Let me button up the shirt at least. Have a great week, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
You too, Jim. Bye, everybody.